Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, we'll look at why a lawsuit's been filed over an elections reform bill that was amended to include changes to homeowners associations. We'll hear about the Cave Creek Town Council's vote to officially oppose APS solar rate hike proposals, and we'll learn about a massive new wind energy farm set for Mojave County. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Lawmakers in the last session approved changes to the way homeowners associations are run. But the changes were pushed onto an elections bill, and critics say that the resulting law violates the state constitution's single subject rule. Attorney Tim Hogan is with the Center for Law and the Public Interest. The group has filed suit over how the HOA bills became law. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we're talking about election bill law, and all of a sudden at the last second, here come HOA changes. Help me
At
here.
the very last second, on the last night of what had been a really long legislative session, this HOA bill that covered a multitude of subjects related to HOAs, from who you can rent property to the size of signs you can put in your yard and things like that, was added on to this elections bill at the last minute on the last night of the legislative session. And what's interesting is this HOA bill had previously died in the session. It had been a separate bill earlier in the session. It passed the House, but it didn't go anywhere in the Senate, and it died. And so here, and in fact, the same bill had been vetoed by the governor the previous year. Fortunately, the Constitution prohibits this kind of stuff.
Well, let's talk about this. Why did you file suit, and why do you think it violates the Constitution?
The Constitution prohibits the legislature from combining more than one subject into a bill. It's called the single subject rule. And the same provision of the Constitution requires that every bill have a title and that the title describe the contents of the bill. And so in this case, we've got a bill that ended up with a title called elections, even though more than 50% of this bill has to do with homeowners associations. But the purpose behind a single subject rule is to prevent what's called log rolling, where you can have two separate bills with minorities supporting those bills, and they can combine into a majority even though they're on vastly different subjects and get it passed.
And that is a violation of the Constitution.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Senator Girgenti, I believe, she was behind the HOA laws, the one that's stalled and all of a sudden found life here at the last second. She is quoted in the Republic as saying, or Republic or Capital Times, I can't remember which one, the Rules Committee staff found that the HOA reforms were germane to the elections bill. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's just silly. I mean, the HOA provisions are totally unrelated to the elections bill, despite the fact that there's one sentence in the HOA bill having to do with being able to vote electronically.
I think there's something about political sign usage as well, political signs for elections.
There are, but that's not about government elections, which is the subject of the reform bill that started out as addressing principally in-kind contributions for candidates.
The HOA mention apparently in the title, again, because I guess Senator Girgenti thought that it was germane, the title didn't need to be changed because they all fit together.
Well, I'll tell you the real-life story of this. Our client in the lawsuit is a HOA activist who follows all of the HOA bills. And he had been dogging the Girgenti bill earlier in the session. And so, but he's been around long enough that he knows just because it died in the Senate didn't mean that it wouldn't come up later. But because the title only said elections, and it was done on the last night, he had no notice whatsoever that they were making this massive change and resurrecting this HOA bill and just layering it on top of an election.
Is that part of your suit, that you claim it is somewhat misleading if you don't know if X is being debated because X is swallowed up by Y?
That's the purpose of the constitutional provision. And we've set that all out in the complaint, sure. He had no notice. If he'd had notice, he might have been able to do what he had done previously, to contact legislators, state his objections to the bill, why it should be held, and it was held previously.
So that's the reason, I think, was it 2 HOA activists or folks involved with HOAs? That's, you filed on behalf of them, correct?
Correct.
And that's why, is it mostly because of the title, just the whole thing, the whole 9 yards?
The whole 9 yards. There's a particular provision that we haven't talked about in the HOA bill that allows HOA management companies to have one of their employees represent the HOA in small claims court. And in small claims court, you can't have a lawyer. And so the homeowner goes into small claims court just by himself with no lawyer. But now the HOA's management company can have one of their executives or officials come into court and represent the HOA. And he was particularly upset about that provision being included in the bill.
Okay, if the court agrees on the single subject violation here, does that mean the entire law is struck down or just half of this?
If the court agrees that it violates the single subject rule, that you have 2 different subjects,
yes,
and we clearly do here, then the entire bill is voided. If, on the other hand, alternatively, the court says, well, I'm not going to reach that issue, the title covers only elections, and so therefore the elections components of this bill will survive. That means all of this HOA stuff would go away.
Okay, so there are 2 possible outcomes that I guess your clients or the people that you're working with would be looking forward to.
Correct, but I also represent clients who have interest in the election reforms, who wouldn't mind that bill going away as well.
All right, so again, we're looking at single subject rule here, and the idea that, I guess what you're saying is, if you want 2 separate things, go ahead and put them in 2 separate bills, address those separate bills. Don't put them together because you're not supposed to be able to do that.
Well, and that's the way this started out until they decided to violate that provision on the last night of the session.
All right. Good to see you again. Thanks so much for joining. We appreciate it.
Get the inside scoop on what's happening at Arizona PBS. Become an 8 Insider. You'll receive weekly updates on the most anticipated upcoming programs and events. Get the 8 Insider delivered to your email inbox. Visit azpbs.org to sign up today.
The town of Cave Creek is the first Arizona municipality to officially reject an APS proposal to raise rates for solar panel users. Joining us now to explain what was a symbolic yet unanimous town council vote is Cave Creek Council member Ernie Bunt. It's good to have you here. Welcome to Horizon.
Well, thank you. It's the first time. Scared to death.
Well, don't you be scared now, because I want to get some answers out of you.
Okay.
The council votes to oppose solar rate hikes here.
Right.
APS has a couple of ideas, a couple of options. We'll get to those in a second. Why?
The solar industry is a really important thing for Arizona because we've got so much sunshine. Creates a lot of electricity, and APS is really looking to yank the rug out from the bottom of the solar industry in the state. It's just not really a good thing for Cave Creek. You know, we're wide open spaces. We love the outdoors. We are the kind of community that really appreciate. We had a lot of solar installations in the town.
The idea, the 2 options, one would, I think, Bill's credit on return power back to the grid, solar users. If you, again, with net metering, the idea being that if you don't use as much power as you get and you put it back there and you get reimbursed for that. The second would be paying what APS considers a fair price on them getting that power back, the returned power. What's wrong with those ideas?
There's probably nothing wrong with the ideas in principle, but the real world effect of those ideas is that without a good financial gain, solar is not going to make a lot of sense. Solar, in all honesty, really will never pay for itself completely. It's probably the most expensive renewable energy source that we've got. Numbers I saw about 3 years ago were somewhere around, over the life of a system, about 12 cents a kilowatt is what it actually costs to generate that. Without getting the kickback, why would anybody put those systems on their homes without a good benefit?
And yet APS will say that because people are getting that benefit and they are not paying as much as they used to, and we've done a number of stories on this, and whether the future of utilities is the way they are now, that's a different beast altogether. But the fact is, what they're saying is, if you've got your solar panels, and I don't, I live in an apartment or something, I'm an elderly person with fixed income, and I can't afford that, you're paying less, which means I'm going to have to start paying more, and that's not fair.
Once again, that goes to the fact that solar really is the most expensive renewable energy source. I think the country as a whole has missed the boat. If you take a look at the European Union, you'll see that most of the power used in Europe is generated from nuclear. The American people have a real aversion to nuclear power plants, but that's what makes the most sense, and it's probably around a penny per kilowatt for generation over the life of that plant. Public opinion has caused APS and other utilities across the country to do things that aren't in their own best interest.
Well, and interesting, and again, that's something that we'll talk about at a later date, because it is fascinating when you think about the future of utilities. Your vice mayor in Cave Creek was quoted in the paper saying that Cave Creek is a community that represents rugged individualism, and Cave Creek should oppose a monopoly's efforts to suppress the free market or otherwise create disincentives for individual investment in alternative energy. Do you agree with that?
For the most part. He talks very eloquently. He's an attorney. He can't help himself.
Well, let's parse it down a little bit here. Is APS, do you think, trying to suppress the free market?
I don't think they're trying to suppress the free market. In the solar energy, the market has actually been propped up by the incentives and by the net metering that's been going on. APS has a legitimate argument. I'm cursed with seeing this issue from both sides. However, I don't believe that the two ideas that they sent forth to the Corporation Commission are all that should be there, and they need to sharpen their pencils. I'm assuming that that's APS's prayer, and they hope that the Corporation Commission just rubber stamps them and sends them back. But they need to sharpen their pencils.
Again, Vice Mayor in the paper saying that the APS wants state-sanctioned, consumer-funded corporate welfare. Again, do you agree with that?
Probably to a certain extent. Yeah.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, we're going to have a moment here.
You go right ahead.
Ask me again, please.
The idea that this is state-sponsored, consumer-funded, corporate welfare on the part of APS. And the reason I'm bringing this up, I don't want to necessarily answer for someone else's comments, but this is the town's vice mayor, and those are pretty bold statements there. That's pretty rough stuff. I want to know if you agree with that.
Yeah, probably not 100%. He's a pretty good guy. I'm very opinionated and speaks very, very forcefully.
Let's talk about what APS says when they speak. And they say that solar customers get too much credit for power sent to the grid. Valid argument?
Yes. Yeah, they're getting, and many times they're getting, the numbers I've seen are 14 to 16 cents a kilowatt. And quite honestly, I believe that they should be more in line with what they pay from the wholesale people when they buy stuff off grid to bring in here. And I also think that they should be allowed to, or that the consumers should be allowed to bank that over a yearly period and use it against their accounts the whole year.
So when APS says that they're looking to pay to pay a fair price for the power that's returned to the grid, it sounds like you think that there's room to move there, room to work.
There is. Like I say, I believe that what they sent to the Corporation Commission was their prayer, and hoping their prayers are answered, and the reasonable solution lies somewhere in the middle.
Speaking of bold statements, APS has come out and basically said that solar users benefit from a reliable grid with little or no cost. You think that's true as well?
That's true as well.
So you are seeing...
I'm conflicted.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're seeing things from both sides, and I find that very interesting. And yet the council voted unanimously, and it sounds as though you believe this could hurt the economy up in Cave Creek and hurt the way a lot of people live.
I think it's going to hurt the solar industry. I believe when the incentives are gone that it won't make much sense. I mean, we've seen what happens when government tries to push solar on the populace with Solyndra and a lot of the other things where tons of money were lost, and that's from the production end. When those things, they produce those things with all the help, then you've got to have a marketplace for those to go to. And if we shut down the marketplace, there won't be any home for the existing systems that are out there and what's supposed to be built in the future.
So let me ask you then, if the two options from APS are not all that feasible and all that attractive, and yet you understand where APS is coming from, because again, if someone's paying less, someone's going to wind up paying more.
Absolutely.
And this is again for the structure of the grid, for transmission lines. I don't even think they're arguing power plants anymore, because I think the idea regarding solar is the more solar, the less you need a power plant somewhere. Be that as it may, is it understandable to you that something's got to be done, that this is just basically, the model isn't feasible for APS? Oh,
that's absolutely right. I mean, the number I've seen is that they're losing approximately $18 million a year based on having 18,000 solar customers, and they believe that they lose about $1,000 per household per year, and that's not good for their shareholders. One of the things that helped me make my decision to vote in favor of the resolution was they came in and talked about it being a fairness issue, not a money issue. And that's not right. It's a money issue. What they're looking is down the road when they've got 60,000, 100,000 solar customers, and all of a sudden that number that's 18 million now becomes 60 million or 100 million, and they're in trouble. It's a financial issue.
But real quickly, from their side of the perspective, they're saying, yeah, those 60,000 are paying less. Everyone who's left, if I don't have the solar, I'm paying more. That's not fair.
No, it's not right. Yeah.
Okay, so there is a fairness issue in there somewhere within the money.
Yeah.
All right. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
A new wind energy farm is in the works for 35,000 acres of federal land in Mojave County, northwest of Kingman. The project is part of President Obama's Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Here with more is Ray Suazo, the State Director for the Arizona Bureau of Land Management. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get to what exactly an action plan with the climate, all that business in a little bit here, but describe this project. What exactly are we talking about?
What we're talking about is essentially roughly around 243 turbines that would generate, when at full capacity, anywhere from 425 to 500 megawatts of power. Essentially, the equivalent of producing enough energy to provide energy for about 175,000 homes. So it's a pretty big deal.
And where are we in the process of this pretty big deal?
So we just recently, Secretary Jewell signed the record of decision in late June, and so we're in the process of, the project is at the point now that they can then start to move towards development of the project. We just got through the analysis phase and the decision-making process.
And where, I mentioned northwest of Kingman. How far northwest of Kingman? Where is this?
It's about 40 miles northwest of Kingman. and so it's an area that, you know, if you've ever driven up and through that area, there's a lot of wind and a great opportunity to, you know, harness that resource, that renewable resource.
There used to be a lot of nothing, too. Is still a lot of nothing up there?
In some areas,
Yeah.
yes.
In this particular area, just wide open spaces?
So some wide open spaces, you know, there are some areas where obviously there's a lot of natural resource that, you know, the public has an interest in, and part of, you know, our process to, you know, analyze those spaces is to think about, you know, the use of those particular spaces and how, you know, this project would work, you know, together with it.
Well, let's talk, and I'm sure that's part of the review process. Let's talk about that, because I've heard that golden eagle habitat is in that particular area. What's being looked at?
So one of the nice things about the approach that we've taken and, you know, thinking about the footprint of the project and the process that we use to actually walk through NEPA and analyze the impacts is not only thinking about keeping the project viable, but thinking about how we protect and, you know, make sure that we take mitigation measures towards, you know, those specific resources. And in the case of this project, the analysis led us to a reduced footprint and to making sure that through mitigation that we're paying attention to eagle nesting areas, that we've got a, you know, 1.2 mile buffer that makes sure we don't have any turbines that are near, you know, any of those nesting areas, and in particular also the private property. You know, we won't have any turbines that are within a quarter mile of private property. So really trying to balance the viability of the project with the natural setting as well.
What about, how close to Lake Mead?
You know, it's also near Lake Mead, and part of the analysis, we reduced the footprint and kept, you know, as much as we could, you know, that visual perspective intact. You know, a lot of the mitigation will look at, you know, specifics for that, really keeping in mind, you know, the relationship of that area, you know, with the project itself.
So this is now, by the way, who's running this plant? Who's behind all this?
BP Wind. BP Wind Energy is the company who will be issued, you know, the right-of-way, who will eventually construct and develop the project.
And what kind of jobs are we talking about? First of all, to create and then to operate.
So the construction phase could be up to about 175,000 jobs, 175 jobs with roughly about, you know, 30 once it's, you know, in permanent state, you know, running fully functioning.
Is that the kind of thing where there'll have to be some sort of housing built in the area to accommodate those folks?
I suspect there will be some type of, you know, the economy, the surrounding, the support services that come in when you've got this level of construction will certainly be, you know, part of the process.
What about water needs? We're always concerned about that regarding projects, especially way out in the boonies, so to speak.
Certainly. Obviously, you know, water, those are considered as, you know, part of the impacts of thinking about a project. You know, keep in mind this is a wind project, which is much different than, you know, maybe some of the other, you know, solar projects that are very water intensive. So the amount of water that would be used would be essentially for anything construction related, not really in the way of, you know, running the facilities, you know, more long term.
So operationally, a massive water
Minimal.
supply is not needed.
No,
okay,
absolutely.
But what about infrastructure? What about transmission lines? It's one thing to have the power; it's another thing to get the power from points A to B. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. You know, once this project is up and running, you know, it'll be linked up to the transmission grid, and the power will be, you know, assuming we can get BP Wind can get a power purchase agreement, you know, figure out who's going to buy the power and how do we get it there. And, you know, along with this project, we've got, you know, several other projects in the state where we're taking a look at, you know, transmission and how do you move, you know, energy, you know, not just within the state, but to, you know, the western, you know, around the western grid, and really working to do a couple of things, move those resources around and make them available, but then also strengthen and solidify the grid. And you might recall, you know, a few years back when there were a lot of rolling brownouts and blackouts in the West. Well, that's an area where infrastructure, when we have an opportunity, you know, for projects like this, and in particular with transmission to upgrade the grid, you know, it's a good thing.
So the construction and the upgrade and the whole kit and caboodle here, what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Well, once they start moving, through the project, getting it developed, I think we're anywhere in the neighborhood of a couple years to, 4 years. It depends on how fast they can move. And then the real factor that comes into play is a power purchase agreement.
Right.
Who's buying the power and where are we going to move it
Interesting. Before we go now, I want to get to the President Obama's Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. What's that?
So, President Obama recently announced, more emphasis on taking a look at, climate impacts. And if you think about what a wind project like this would play a role in, it definitely plays a role. When you think of, climate impacts in the West, which we're just now starting to pay attention to, what do they mean and how do they affect, not just public land, but, the West in general. What do we have? Drought. We have, a whole host of things, whether it be riparian and other. And so having a responsible, renewable energy like this project is only an added value towards that climate, change approach.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.